survivors, and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 26, and in this edition we add our fourth installment to the profile series, focusing on the motorcycle riding, freedom fighting Claire Redfield. My name is Syniac, you can just call me Cy, and joining me on the panel this week, he actually came here to find his brother Chris, but we're 26 plus episodes in now and I just won't let him leave. It's Firebutton Steve Valance.
Hello everybody.
What's going on? I arrived on this podcast and the whole place has gone insane. Our special guest in this show, you may know her from her cosplay or passionate tweeting about Claire Redfield, it's HopeHavoc.
Hello.
This episode of the podcast was not recorded live, but the vast majority of our episodes are, so join our Discord to hear podcasts early and unedited, as well as engage with our community, contribute to the show and other upcoming projects, and be informed first of everything going on behind the scenes. You can find a link to the server in the description of the podcast or on our social media accounts. You can also support the show on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, with various tiers, each with their own perks. Check out patreon.com/FASprayPod for a full list and the chance to create bonus First Aid Spray content. So, first things first, let's do the housekeeping from our end of things. We will introduce our panelist shortly, but another shout out for those of you who listened to the previous profile episode. You'll have known that Distant Memories 1996 did some exclusive writings for us for this episode that we did with Sherry, and the same thing can be said for our Claire episode. So a special thank you to him for the very extended file readings in this episode, written by him and read by Dabble Lou. They are much longer than you're used to from listening to the podcast, but I promise they're worth it. So yeah, look forward to those over the course of the episode. In terms of other content that we've put out since you last heard from us, our most recent YouTube output is the 5 worst final bosses in Resident Evil as voted by our Discord server, so that one was kind of fun. And we also just uploaded 5 redemption arcs in Resident Evil, which is they're both worth checking them out. We're still pumping out those editorials, so make sure you subscribe so you can see stuff like that. And the Last of Us bonus podcast, which is now out publicly as we move on to record episodes voted by our Patreons that include the Silent Hill films, which is going to be an interesting one, and Castlevania, which we're very excited about. So let's get into the meat of it. Let's talk about Claire Redfield, and let's talk about our Claire Redfield cosplaying panelist, Hope. So I always like to ask our guests the big question. What was your first Resident Evil experience? Where did you jump on with the series, and kind of what made you fall in love with the franchise?
So my first game was Resident Evil Director's Cut. I was in between 6 and 7 years old. My dad rented it. Yeah. My dad rented it from Blockbuster, which, bless Blockbuster's soul, I miss it. And it was kind of love at first sight. Like, he was always into zombies and horror and stuff and got me into it at a young age. Resident Evil's my first recollection of, like, my experience with zombies and stuff, but I was obsessed with it. We were both obsessed with it, and I don't know, I just loved it immediately. I used to have this closet in my old bedroom in my old house that we lived in, and every night I would fall asleep staring at it because I was convinced that the keeper zombie was going to bust out of my closet. So I loved it. I bonded with Jill right away, and then Resident Evil 2 came into my life and Claire stole my heart. But yeah, started at a young age. Director's Cut is still one of my favorite games. I think it's more than just nostalgia. I really just love the atmosphere and the vibe, and just everything about Resident Evil appeals to me in a big way.
Awesome. We have a lot of people that go way back with the series, but I don't think anyone goes back to 6 or 7 years old. That's
really? Yeah,
that's quite impressive.
I'm really bad at math and recollecting my years. So I always just keep it as I was in between 6 and 7, because I don't remember which one I was technically closer to.
Fair enough.
I'm glad the series has been with me for such a long time.
Right.
And I've never lost any love for it. I've been completely obsessed with it since I was 6 or 7.
So, when did the cosplaying start? Did you start with Resident Evil cosplay, or was that something that you developed onto? So, what was your sort of history with cosplay?
So, Resident Evil is technically my first serious cosplay. I did dress up as Pikachu prior to that, and then I don't know if you guys have heard of Salad Fingers.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I cosplayed him too. I was him for
Rusty
Halloween one
Spoons.
year. And then it was Pikachu for my first Otakon. But I mean, I didn't really take them very seriously. Like Pikachu, I had the ears and the tail. I put on some red cheeks. I had a yellow dress. Like, it was cute, but it wasn't like Claire. I put my whole heart and soul into. And I actually cosplayed her for the first time when I was 19. So it was like exciting to cosplay her at the year that she made her debut in the series.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Is it so? Is there particular Claire costumes, or are you just kind of running through the gambit now? Which ones have you done? Which ones are you looking to do?
I mostly do Code Veronica. That's the one I started with. It's the one I wear most frequently. I did the original Resident Evil 2 outfit, which I really love that one. That was my first one that I made completely from scratch. The Code Veronica one, I bought a lot of the materials, like the vest I bought, and I had to pay to have it professionally altered because I didn't want to mess anything up. It was like real leather. It was too hard to manipulate that material with the sewing machine that I had. And then the back was a stencil design, whereas with the Resident Evil 2 costume, I hand drew the logo on the back and painted it instead of using a stencil that time. And it was my first time, like, building the clothing from scratch, from fabric that I got from a store. And it was really hard, especially the shorts were like a nightmare to work with. But it was a lot of fun, and it's like kind of extra satisfying when you do it from scratch. Like, it was cool. It was just a huge headache at the same time. I have done her Degeneration costume, but I've only worn that once, and it does not fit me at all anymore. I need to completely remake it, or like, I don't even know if I could take the whole thing in. Like, I've lost so much weight since that point in my life. And I have parts to do her Resident Evil 2 costume from Darkside Chronicles, but I have not finished it yet. I'm like really slacking on the cosplays I want to make, but I eventually would like to do all of them. One of my favorites that I really am looking forward to doing one day is the alternate biker costume from Darkside Chronicles, where she's wearing the black and the white and she has a fairy on the back of the jacket. Yeah, that's one of my favorite costumes of hers. So I really want to do that. My next one will probably be remake Claire. And I would like to touch up on the original Resident Evil 2 costume that I made. But at this point, like, I've got parts to do the Dark Side one, and then I'm also like really excited to do her quote unquote classic costume from Remake, which that's probably my favorite interpretation of that outfit. I like them all, but I really love how that one came out.
That's cool. Sounds like you're juggling a lot. I think it's interesting for people that are outside of the world of cosplay. They always see how much love people put into it. So to actually hear how much of a commitment it is, that's why you see these people who are so in deep in the trenches in it. Because it's a lot of effort to put these together, either yourself or to pay exuberant amount of money or a bit of both. It's it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I definitely, I don't know how so many people just do it so effortlessly because it's a lot of time and a lot of money, and some people are like really, really great with it and they're just constantly putting them out. I'm just like, how do you do that? I'm so jealous. It's definitely fun. It really is. Like, you have to have a passion for it or else you're not going to be able to keep up with it all. But it is a headache, whether you're doing it yourself or paying somebody else to do it. A lot of love and hate goes into the process.
Right. Yeah.
Love and hate.
All the best things.
I'm getting lots of sleepless nights in front of sewing machines.
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. Well, with all out of the way, let's move into a rather jam-packed edition of the Biohazard News.
So our first piece of news, the original Jill Valentine live-action actress, Inez, may have been found. What do you think of that then?
That is so exciting. I really loved her in Director's Cut.
Yeah, it has been a long time coming, hasn't it? Apparently, it's just her and the actor that played Joseph, I think, that haven't sort of been sought out.
That's cool too. I didn't hear that part. I only knew that they found her.
I don't think
That's
he's been
awesome.
found. I think he is now the
Oh.
remaining actor that hasn't been identified, if you like. So hopefully it'll be interesting to see what comes of this. Apparently there's an interview in the works with Resident Evil Database, so that's pretty cool.
This is the live action actress and not the voice actress, right? They are.
Right,
I mean, I
yeah.
don't. They might be the same person. I don't know.
I believe there's separate people, but it might be the rare case that she did both. I think it's separate. I think all the live action stuff was very last minute, wasn't it? So
Yeah, I think
just
so.
kind of
'Cause
grabbed
like-
who they had. So
I kind of like. I'm excited, but we all know how Resi fans can be. And I get the feeling that from the second that she's had this interview, there's going to be like people knocking on her door going, sign my t-shirt, or look at this figurine based on you, and like overwhelm them.
Yeah, sure.
So if I can just add my voice to the mix, just like everybody, take it calm. This lady has like literally just been like unleashed upon everybody, so she doesn't probably know much about the franchise. I mean, if she was, she would probably have spoken up sooner. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
So let's all play it cool and get to know her first before we bombard our inbox with loads and loads of fan messages.
Yeah, this was just a job to her from like 24 years ago, so don't expect, And as again, 24 years ago, who knows what she'll remember about it. It was a long time ago for just a random night in some field in Japan where they filmed it. But it's
I can't
cool,
wait.
at least. Yeah.
Can't wait for this interview, because if it is a case of Resident Evil, those live action films, if that's the response, oh my god.
I mean, to be fair, it would make sense. It's like, oh yeah, we were, the movies, right? Yeah.
So our next piece of news, Resident Evil Resistance has a new update, which is bringing both free skins and paid survivor skins, as well as remixed maps. These paid skins are basically Leon and Claire's outfit from Resident Evil 2 Remake. And the new outfits themselves, I think you've got like a Lucha Libre motif and then a Mad Max vibe.
Yes,
is that right?
Like a post-apocalyptic. Mad Max is definitely the way to put it, with all the characters in various deserty kind of garb. And yeah, the Lucha one. And speaking as a wrestling fan, some cool references in there. I have to say that typical of the Resistance guys to squeeze in some references and stuff. There's probably references in the post-apocalyptic one that I didn't see, but that sums it up. That they're just like, hey, here's some cool nods to stuff. And again, as always, more free stuff in Resistance. You can't complain.
Yeah, the only paid DLC is literally Leon and Claire's outfits. These remixed maps, the skins, they're all free.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I know.
They're like a few £1 as well. You can buy them. You can just buy the Leon ones. You can just buy the Claire ones, or you can buy them both together. I was playing with some of the guys off the server the other day, and it came up, and I was like, I wonder if the Claire pack is slightly more expensive because there's 4 characters that can use it as opposed to 3 in the male one. But no, it's a pretty flat fee and totally optional. And yeah, the maps, like you say, have you had a chance to play on these yet at all?
I have. Honestly, it's just one of those things we have to get used to. I like how they have remixed them, but it basically means that I now need to have the map up on screen the entire time I play.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm getting lost, because obviously things that look familiar but aren't, and therefore playing with you, which means the masterminds get yet another buff. Just saying. I'm not salty. You're salty. But have you played Resistance at all, Hope, or is this something that's kind of?
I have dabbled with it a little bit. I am a person who appreciates easy mode when it's offered to me in games, so I kind of suck at Resistance. I've only played with a couple of my friends, and I feel bad, like even playing with them, because I feel like I'm so terrible at it, and they're so good at it. But I have enjoyed what I have played of it. It's just I don't play it that often because I'm always like, oh my god, I'm terrible at this. And a lot of people are really mean. Not my friends, of course, but like I see people popping off about it on Twitter. I'm just like, oh my god, that would be me. I would be that person that you're bitching about.
Yeah,
but
I have the same feeling, because I went back after a couple of months basically of not playing it with some of the guys last night, and I was so out of the loop. I was just dead weight, but
it's
I do
okay.
really like the concept, and I think it's fun. I love the characters. I wasn't stoked on the Claire and Leon DLC just because I would rather have Claire and Leon themselves as characters. I guess that's really like picky, but I always really liked, and I complained about this a lot to my friends, like I always really liked how Claire had a very unique style in Resident Evil. It set her apart from other characters, and over the years I kind of felt like they started giving a little bit of her like personality and her wardrobe and stuff away to other characters. That might just be me like thinking too much or feeling some kind of way about it. But just for me to have that complaint and to complain about that pretty often to my friends and to see them turn around and go, now all the characters can dress like Claire. I'm just like, are we serious? Are we serious? Like, Claire's always been so unique in her outfits. Like, stop! I was just so upset. I don't want to see Jill running around in Claire's outfit. Like, as good as she looks in the Noir mods, that makes me upset too. I'm like, that's Claire's outfit. Stop it.
See, that's the thing. That's the thing. I still think this doesn't write off Leon and Claire as potential characters in the future. I feel like they could just use different costumes for it.
Yeah, I suppose that's true, actually. I was worried that maybe this means that they're not going to come at some point, and who knows, but I guess that's true.
And there's always skills you could cook up and make up, Absolutely. Isn't there? You know, like Leon summons a really bad laser sight so he can always hit things. And Claire gets the grenade launcher that kicks everyone's arse.
Yeah,
you know, it's
something like that, yeah.
Or a bowgun, just for you, Si.
Yeah, exactly, right? Give me that bowgun back. In terms of the new maps, though, we're just sort of praising a little bit the guys behind Resistance. When I heard remixed maps, I think I tried to downplay, because everyone said, oh, you know, Uptown is one of them. Is that going to be the area from RE3? And it was a really exciting concept. But I kind of figured it's probably not going to be. And it isn't. But I tell you what, they've done more with it than I thought. You know, I thought, oh, it's going to be like a mirrored version. And that's even how someone pitched it to me when they were out. It's, oh, they're kind of like mirrored maps. They're really, really not. They're just really just using assets from maps they already have in completely new ways. The Uptown one itself is totally different to Downtown. And the Bemusement Park one, again, is pretty different. It will send you through the loop, at least that much. But yeah, this is way more than I expected, with continual free updates. Obviously, the status of everything in the world, that at some point they were probably working from home if they're not still doing that. Good on them for still pumping out quality content. That's all I'll say from there.
I was going to say, as a person who's keen to go green, I'm down for recycling if it works. You know? So our last piece of news then, kind of a big one. Resident Evil's worldwide sales for the entire series have surpassed 100 million units.
Indeed. Woohoo.
That's a big number.
It is a big number.
That's not a small number, Si. That's a lot of games.
Here's a lot of zeros. So this comes with the most up-to-date sales figures in general from Capcom, with your sort of quarterly reports and stuff. Resident Evil 3 did 2.7 million units, which isn't bad, but is a bit of a step down from what the RE2 remake did in the first, 3-4 months now. But overall, the series has passed that big target, so that's the highlight of that news. I think RE7 is on track it's catching up with RE5. That's what I hear.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize 7 was that close. I thought 7 was a divisive child because the camera angle has changed.
Oh, it's on its way. I know that much.
I mean, speaking of, if people are like on the fence about RE7, my main advice would be, if it's the motion controls, the motion sickness and stuff, there are ways to combat that and give it a go. Not to try and bump those figures up to beat RE5, because then Sonny Bauer from Crimson Head Elder will beat me to death. But, it's worth your time if you haven't tried it.
I was really surprised with Resident Evil 7. I really enjoyed that game. But I have motion sickness sometimes. And when I played the demo for 7, I was playing it with a friend, and I always had to give him the controller and lay down because it made me so sick. And I was so worried about what my experience with the game was going to be like. Even though beginning hour gave me so much nausea, when I got my hands on the actual game, I didn't experience that like at all. I don't know if it was just like my excitement was overpowering whatever sickness I could have been feeling, but I couldn't put it down. I really loved it. Of course, there's things to critique about it, but I don't get where all the hate for it comes from in the fandom, because I thought Resident Evil 7 was pretty good. I got the collector's edition, and I don't regret spending that money.
Nice.
The house is like the coolest little thing ever. But yeah, you can definitely get around the motion sickness, I would say. I mean, I guess I can't speak for everybody. I've heard other people were able to like do things to get around it. But for me, like, I guess maybe I was just lucky. I don't know what happened there where I didn't experience any motion sickness, but
there's
the
a lot of
demo
options
for
you can
it was
toggle.
bad. Like,
Yeah.
I was so sick. And
The,
then game came out.
Speaking of which, because obviously we've got Distant Memories writing for this episode, to shout out to him the absolute story of him having troubles with motion sickness in that game, and everyone sort of feeling terrible for him for not being able to enjoy that game. But yeah, he got around it, a combination of messing with field of view, I think, and camera speed. It's worth trying. Obviously, if you can't do it, then that's awful. I don't think everyone will be able to get around it. Depends how bad your motion sickness conditions are, and that sucks. But damn, if you can, it's a great game.
And I say, it's nice to have all these visual effects and things, but I'm glad accessibility is always like at least thought about. You know, I have to ask, Si, what are like the top rankings for the Resident Evil sales? Then, like, 5's number 1, and then
you put me on the spot now. I have to bring up.
I'm sorry.
There's a Capcom page, isn't there, that has them all on. Let me just boot that up because I think it's So Capcom Platinum titles is what it is, which is 90 titles that have sold more than 1 million copies or something. So Resident Evil 5, according to this website, is 7.6. Resident Evil 6 is 7.5, as is Resident Evil 7. So you know, 0.1 of a million away from tying up with RE5 apparently, and then below that, Resident Evil 2 is already on 6.6 million after a year and a half.
Wait, so Leon's European Adventure isn't even like competing with these at all?
No, apparently not.
Wow.
The classic Resident Evil 2 is higher than that. So
it's weird when you think about how many times that game has like been ported. Like, I'm pretty sure it's on my toaster in the kitchen. Like, that's surreal.
I obviously the thing about it's difficult with that. They have to take different formats into different considerations, perhaps. And so that's probably what has forced RE4 to fall down those rankings, because it's probably ranked in so many different ways. So yeah, but who knows? Maybe the remake will. No, anyway, let's not go there. So that's the news. Let's get into the main topic of this episode, which is Profile Claire Redfield. And now, original writings by Distant Memories 1996, who you can follow on Twitter at DistantMemory96, read in character as Claire Redfield by Less Awake, who you can follow on Twitter at DabbleLou.
October 3rd, 1998. There's an old saying that states, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." I'm not one to believe in such statements. I'd have rather thrown caution to the wind and come hell or high water, face it myself instead. I had no idea what exactly I was getting myself into that night. The night that my life undoubtedly changed forever. I truly did have the very best of intentions when I dropped everything going on around me, my college semester temporarily coming to a close for the summer, and hit the eerily silent road that evening for Raccoon City. It was the last and only place I once thought I could reach him. The only other living member of the Redfield family, my older brother, Chris Redfield. He was the person who practically raised me when we were kids, after our parents tragically died in a car crash. The death of both of them wickedly shook our world, turning it completely upside down, and left us broken for years in ways we never imagined. After losing them, we bounced from foster home to foster home until we were old enough to be considered legal adults. During those dark and uncertain days, he was always there for me when I needed him most. We both had each other. We were all that we had. But we did our best. I owe him so much. Chris taught me nearly everything I know, from ordinary life skills to the basics on how to protect myself from the unknown evils of the world outside. As we got older, we split paths. I went one way, he went another. I took the road of a college student, pursuing my own unwritten future, whilst he chose to be a pilot for the United States Air Force. I remember wishing him the very best of luck in his decision, but somehow knowing how my older brother was with things, that he'd probably do something to get himself in trouble with authority. And it turned out, I knew him quite well. One day, he called to tell me that he was discharged from the Air Force and was going to pursue a career in law enforcement instead. Due to my own exams, I wasn't able to attend his academy graduation ceremony, but I told him that I'd reconnect back with him once the semester ended. It's without a doubt in my mind that I know Mom and Dad would have been so proud of him, as I was. It didn't take me long to hear back from him either. I was greeted shortly afterwards with a surprise phone call from his desk phone down at the Raccoon City Police Department. He said that he had been hired there as an officer in an elite special unit, one so distinguished that he said it couldn't really be discussed over the phone. He told me to reach out to him when I could come into town so that we could celebrate properly. In the days that passed since that short conversation, I desperately tried to reach him at his desk, with no answer whatsoever. The phone rang out into an empty void of silence, and strangely, come late September, so did the main number for the precinct. I was sure someone would be there to pick up the phone, but the last time I tried to call, the phone call didn't even ring out. It just disconnected entirely, like no one was there at all. My gut told me that something was very wrong. It was then that I grabbed my things and did what anyone would have done, which was go there myself. The city was the only place I thought I would find the answers to the questions that swirled around in my head. My lack of sleep wasn't helping me either, as I feared the worst. Losing both Mom and Dad those many years ago, I wasn't about to lose the only other person in my life that meant something to me. Once I finally arrived that one summer night in September, I'd eventually come to find that once peaceful town of Raccoon City had been turned into a private hell at the hands of a faceless corporation. That night I fought for my life and the lives of others. It was split-second decisions, careful level-headed teamwork, and bravery that allowed myself and the others to make it out of that horrific place in one piece. It was there that I met a rookie cop of the former RPD on what was surely his first and last day on the force, a man named Leon S. Kennedy, and we were joined by a sweet young girl by the name of Sherry Birkin. It was the little girl's parents' ties to the Umbrella Corporation that had ruined them both, and left her an orphan like myself. Raccoon City was no longer a place for the living. The lives lost, the destruction caused by Umbrella's heartless ways, and the effect their actions would have on the world was much too great to turn a blind eye. I guess Chris was right about life, and making the right decisions. They aren't going to be the easiest. They do require personal sacrifice in some way on our part, but in the end are right and just. I hope to continue writing the rest of my story, so that one day I can share it with you, brother. Writing in the same pages in your journal that you left at your desk in the STARS office, that you somehow knew I'd find when I inevitably came looking for you. You know me well, brother, as I know you all the same too. But just know that my never-ending search and determination to find you will not end. Based on the information you left me in your notes, and my own bit of digging, I've now booked a flight to Europe, your last known location, where I hope to finally reunite with you, just not in the way we had originally planned, and help you put a stop to Umbrella, once and for all. I'll never stop looking until I've found you, Chris. Once a Redfield, always a Redfield, until the day my body breathes its last breath.
Okay, we have arrived. Thus far in the profile series, we've handled characters with a few appearances. Rebecca, Barry, Sherry, some kind of more minor, more background characters that we all wish they appeared more, but sadly it's just a handful. This is one of the sort of, and I think we've described them on the show as this before, or on some videos we've done, the sort of like 4 pillars of Resident Evil protagonists, and we're hitting the first one with Claire Redfield. So there's quite a lot to get through in terms of appearances. So let's roll right into a bit of an introduction. This is from the Resident Evil podcast's mythology, what would you call that? Documentation. Thousands of pages written by the Batman. I'm sure you're all aware of it. If you're not, ResidentEvilPodcast.com. It is the most... It's incredible. Just if you need Resident Evil lore, you'll get lost in it. So I'm just going to sort of read through some of sort of Claire's setup, and then we're going to roll into her first appearance. So Claire is the younger sister of Chris Redfield, and grew up to become a light-hearted, articulate, modern woman. Unlike her brother, she was somewhat wild, self-confident, and extroverted, and was typically the first person to try something others wouldn't. This mental toughness was developed from a very young age following the loss of both her parents and her status as an orphan. She developed an extremely close bond with her brother, and they would do anything for each other. Claire grew up to become something of a tomboy and added motorbiking more and adored motorbiking more than anything else, owning 2 large bikes. She attended college and had several boyfriends. She maintained her close relationship with Chris and was extremely proud of his work in STARS. He also taught her many survival techniques for her own protection, and even gave her a standard issue STARS combat knife she kept with her at all times for self-defense. He also gave her shooting lessons to ensure she was competent with firearms. In addition, her manual dexterity was on par with Jill Valentine, and she was an expert at picking locks. Following the mansion incident, Chris left America for Europe to investigate Umbrella's main headquarters. In order to protect Claire from potential dangers, he broke off all contact and did not tell her where he was going. But this move backfired when Claire grew worried about why he suddenly failed to keep in touch, and eventually she decided to take out time from college and travel to Raccoon City to find him. But by the time she arrived, the city was already destroyed by the T-virus outbreak. Which brings us to Resident Evil 2, the 1998 edition. Claire Redfield, one of 2 very iconic introduced protagonists. It's always hard to know where to start with this in general. This one's going to be particularly difficult, I find. This was my introduction to Resident Evil. It's my favourite game of all time. And, I mean, we might as well just put all the cards down. Claire Redfield is my favourite character of all time, so this is going to be very difficult for me to find an articulate way to talk about it. So, Steve, would you like to take it away? Yeah, I'm sure you do. Steve, would you like to set us up so that we can sort of ramble and blush about it afterwards? What did you think of Claire in Resident Evil 2? What was your sort of first impression of Claire?
It's all right. No, honestly, of the 2, coming from trying to look through the lenses of 1998.
Yeah.
Claire and Leon are a massive step up for me personally over original Chris and original Jill. Not only are the vocal performances much stronger, they obviously have, shall we say, a little bit more emotional range. As a character, I would say that Claire is the stronger of the 2, although, God bless Paul, her dad. Mm-hmm. He did a fantastic turn as Leon. I would say Alison Court's Claire in RE2. While some would probably argue these days may or may not be the definitive, they're wrong. I think, definitely set a standard. I would still argue that the scripting of RE2 is a little hokey in places, but the Claire presented here is, if not the best, one of the best. She's feisty, she's sassy, but she also cares and has a very good compassionate streak when need calls for it. And she's not out of her depth as much as the rookie cop counterpart.
Right. That's actually very, very true. Leon spends a lot of his campaign for good reasons, chasing after Ada, who's very capable, and sort of being left in the dust a little bit. Whereas Claire, because her partner character is, a tiny, terrified child, she has to step up and be that stone, doesn't she? My first note was RE2 is such a step up in general in terms of performance. The casting, like you mentioned, is absolutely a brilliant. We can all agree with that, and how
I'm definitely nodding my head in agreement.
Yeah, and the interplay as well between all of these actors as well. Alison has an incredible back and forth with every single character that she performs alongside. Paul's Leon, Lisa Yamanaka as Sherry, even shorter scenes like with Irons and with Annette. All of those scenes are fantastically portrayed. So the script might be a little bit clunky at this point, I guess. But they're just unbelievably improved over what RE1 was. I mean, it'd be a stretch to be more ridiculous, wouldn't it, than RE1? But it's night and day, isn't it? So, Hope, what was your first impression of Claire Redfield, if you can remember way back in those hazy days?
Oh my gosh. Well, I immediately fell in love with her. I mean, she's this badass on this bike and really cute outfit. Like, what more could a I think I was like in between 7 and 8 at this point, not 6 and 7. What more could I want? I love her in every single game. Like, when people ask me what's my favorite Claire, I have a very hard time thinking about that because I feel like they're all her and I love her like equally. I like how, Claire is seen as one of the most emotional characters in the series, but she also has this nonchalantness about her demeanor. And even though her emotions can hit extremes, it's also contrasted by this cool, calm, and collected attitude. And I think in the original Resident Evil 2, she displays that side of her a lot. She's known to be really sassy, and that trait shows up a lot, whether she's being like playfully flirtatious or having aggressive quips or even dry, sarcastic remarks and jokes. And I think she uses a lot of the dry sarcasm in the original Resident Evil 2. And I think a lot of people typically overlook that side of her because she has such a diverse range of emotions. She's so colorful and complex with her emotions that we just typically think of her as this emotional character. In the original, I just like my brain's like faltering. Like, I've got too much to say and it's like all going through my head at once. When we first started talking about this, like, I immediately felt my heart start to beat really fast. I'm like, oh, we're getting to the good stuff. We're getting to talking about Claire now. Basically, what I was trying to say is I feel like that nonchalantness is really apparent in the original Resident Evil 2, but that doesn't stop her from hitting all those other levels of emotion that we're used to. Like, she displays fear, which is awesome because a lot of times you have these badass characters that don't really show that side. And even though Claire's always been depicted as a badass, like, some people act like, oh, they made her a badass in Revelations 2, blah, blah, blah. She's always been a badass. Like, shut up with that. I don't know why people act like that's some great change to her character. She's always been a badass, but she's always shown fear. And in 2, this is our first time seeing her. Of course, it's going to be more obvious back then. Code Veronica, they do a really good job too, but we're talking about 2 right now, and I got to try to stay focused. My brain just keeps
no, it's fine. You landed right on something that I wanted to say, is that it's so easy for, and this term didn't really exist, I don't think, back then, but it's so easy to write these strong, capable characters, and they just become Mary Sue, right. She could have been so generic. It's like, oh, we need a rad female character, role model type. She's going to be strong, but that could have made her so generic. And there's tons of subtlety. There's loads of grace, all in between all of that. She's strong, but the differences between her and some of these other, like, cigar chomping, assault rifle wielding action hero characters that we were sort of doing away with at this point in gaming.
Hey, I love Carlos.
in terms of like the late 90s, when, in video games, writing was becoming a lot stronger and a lot more layered. She lands realistically between everything going on there. She's capable, she's caring, she's a great role model. She's not any particular way. She lands right in the middle of all of that. She has these amazing moments, like you said, of being a badass, but also she's nurturing without being like a wimpy stereotype. It's incredible. Just looking back on it, and I play this game a lot still, but looking back on it and actually thinking about it was like, how did this character written in 98? It makes my head spin. For me, she's the most realistic character. Obviously, she's the most realistic character of the series up until this point. We only had 2 games. But in terms of all the PS1 games, she's got one competitor, and I still think she's the most realistic character of the classic Resident Evil games. And up to today, I would still say she's probably the most realistically built character of everyone, in my opinion. Steve, what do you think about sort of her personality traits? Because she's a tomboy, but she's, not just a tomboy. Like we say, she's...
In RE2 specifically, yeah?
Yeah, let's try and focus. I know it's difficult.
No, it's fine. The way I see Claire as an actual person in Resident Evil 2, I feel like this is going to change over the course of the various games, but at this point, Claire is the badass big sister. Like, she... not just Sherry, obviously, but like imagine Leon as a younger sibling as well. The way she always knows what she's doing. Mostly calm and collected and capable. She doesn't. I don't think she really freaks out much, except literally maybe with the first zombie. And even then, it's hello, and then trying to get out of there. She never panics. She's a trailblazer, and she's there for people. It's hard to explain really, but she's like in 80s action movie tropes. She's the big sister who's trying to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, she knuckles down, realizes the situation they're in, and just sort of, okay, this is what we have to do to make sure we all get out of here alive. It's not in a cold, heartless way. That's what I'm saying. She's not just like shooting her way through every corridor. She's actually there for characters. That's the difference, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing she does when she sees Leon in the Leon B campaign or Claire A campaign, however you want to look at it, is like, Leon, I know you're kind of struggling, mate, but I need you to get Sherry out. I need to get this vaccine, basically. I mean, not the exact words. And Leon's just seen his quote-unquote best friend, who he's known all of 5 minutes, get smashed into a console or thrown off a cliff. So the fact that she can still get him to do things and motivate him to like actually help, I think is great. Because, leadership potential, I suppose, would be
right. Yeah,
a way
that's
to
true.
describe it.
Absolutely.
She definitely has this quality about her where she can either take the leadership role or she can be like a supportive role, but really, really good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, out of all of the main protagonists, I think Claire is the one who, maybe outside of a brother, Claire is probably the one who would take the lead the most, at least at this point.
And logically speaking, that makes sense. Like we were just saying in the sort of intro there, her character makes a whole lot of sense. She's been trained by her also orphaned brother, who would wind up going to the military and then working in the police enforcement. So that obviously he's very driven in that way, and he's passed those character traits on, the importance of doing the right thing, even though it's tough. So obviously, performance by Alison Court. We're going to be talking about her a lot throughout this episode. This is the debut of Alison Court as Claire Redfield. Just such a great, warm performance. Helps that bring her to life, make her real. It's why she's synonymous with Claire and Resident Evil in general, is just because it feels so real. We're going to have to move away from her, though, because we've got to talk about Remake 2. So before we do that, though, do we need to call out if this is our favourite Claire performance or not? I mean, it's mine, obviously. It's my favourite game, so it'd be hard to say otherwise. Not that there aren't other contenders.
I don't have a favourite. I like them all.
Yeah, you say that now. I'm gonna force one out of you by the end of it.
No! That's gonna be like the longest silence for me, just with the gears spinning in my head trying to think. I just love them so much.
Steve, final thoughts on RE2 Claire. How does it rank for you?
Oh, God, you're doing this now. Oh,
this is the key one, right? We have to at least do a little bit of it here.
Okay, so out of Alison Court's portrayals of Claire, that's just still friggin' tough.
Mm-hmm.
Can we go through some of the later bits to just
let
my brain settle? I want to let my brain settle.
You guys clearly need some time to think about it. That's fine. Obviously, I don't. This is it for me. But I'm still excited to talk about the rest. So we're doing this as usual with the profile episodes. We'd like to do everything as canonical order as much as possible, save for remakes. So Alison Court played Claire up until Revelations 2. And she also did not play her in Resident Evil 2. So, Resident Evil 2 Remake, where she was played by Stephanie Panisello. This is the third actress to play Claire. Obviously, this is a retelling of the 1998 original, which is in many ways close to the classic game, and in many ways very, very different. And I think Claire falls very much into the different category. I'm going to be interested to see some arguments. I'm sure other people feel otherwise. Part of that is probably the recasting. But her character. Actually, I'm gonna save that one. Hope, let's start with you. How did you feel about the Resident Evil 2 remake, Claire, when you were sort of first introduced to her when you got the game for the first time? What was that experience like?
I loved her. My only complaint is that they got rid of her auburn hair. That was a big one for me. I was very upset by that, but I think they did great with her. I think Stephanie did great with her. Now, I feel like a lot of people's issue, God, I don't know why. Before we did this podcast, I decided I was going to write down all my thoughts, and of course, I wrote a damn novel. And now, like, I try to like go through. I'm like, what were the points that I wanted to like touch upon? And I'm like, I literally wrote like a novel. Like, there's no way I can find certain things or even cover all this. I should just talk the top of my head, but that's no good either. I feel like a lot of people who have issues with the way Claire is in the remake, and I can't speak for everybody. This is just like from things I see and put up with. I think a lot of it can be boiled down to the different voice actors and not so much the dialogue, but how the actresses portray the dialogue. I think it's just a matter of the lines being delivered differently, because the dialogue still seems very fitting to me for Claire. I can't pick between Allison and Stephanie at this point. I like them both a lot. I played the remake of 2 so many times that, like, I can't even say she's grown on me, because I liked her immediately as Claire. Allison Court's always going to be one of my all-time favorite voice actors. But I really think Stephanie did a good job. And I think a lot of the difference is their tone and the way that they would speak. And some people think that Stephanie's take on Claire ruined what we knew of Claire's personality, and I don't see that at all. I think it just adds more diversity to her already diverse personality. Allison's voice was like really unique, and it kind of was a bit sultry and had this sugariness about it, which I thought was really fitting for Claire's overall character. Whereas Stephanie's voice is different. It still, like, in my opinion, captures the general essence of Claire. It just hits in a different way. She has more of like this cuteness to her voice, but she still has like this edge that encompasses like Claire's sweet and playful side versus her tougher and more tomboyish side. So I like the new voice change. I think it's still really fitting for her. I think it adds more to her as opposed to changing anything about her. I think it just gives us a new way to look at her character with the way that the lines are delivered. I think she's written really well. I was really pleased. Like, the biggest complaint I had about Claire in remake would literally be the auburn hair. That's all I can think about. Like, I was really pleased. I'm just going to say it a million times. I was happy.
That's good. That is good to hear, at least. And
I like she makes little sarcastic comments and little dumb jokes, and she's just perfect to me. Like, I feel like the most important things about Claire were in. I don't mean to keep cutting you off.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine.
I feel like the most important things about Claire's personality were present in this depiction of her. She's very protective. She's stubborn. She is compassionate. She's sassy. She's silly. She's flirty. Like, they hit on all her character traits. She even gets really emotional and upset over Sherry a couple of times, whether it's snapping at Annette or she gets teary-eyed a few times. You can hear her voice cracking. I think it's all done really well. Like, I loved it. And her dry humor is a little bit different than the way Allison delivered those lines, but you can still tell, like, she's got that range. She goes from her dry sarcasm to her silly, mischievous, like, little comments. Like, I think she's great.
Yeah,
I think talking now.
I think well said. That's what I think. You made a strong argument. I'm glad to hear as well that it was they succeeded in what they were going for by It's weird because it does feel like very much a shake-up, but it is identically Claire. You're right. She's got all the key moments and all the key points of her personality. For me, there's a couple of weird things. You said maybe not the script, but perhaps some of the line readings. There's one that I just can't. Which is when she meets Sherry And Sherry says, "Oh, her dad's dead." And Claire says, "Wow, both my parents are dead." Just the way she says that is so weird. But other than that, I think the performance is really good. Her own take on that personality is strong. Steve, you streamed Remake 2 a few times recently and called out the scene at the gate between her and Leon. I love that scene. I think it's great.
Yeah, I don't get why people roast people over it, because I find it like, they are in a really bad situation. They've just seen a person they recognize. Let's take a moment to just, have a head check and just try and act normal for 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they're being goofy and flirting during the zombie apocalypse. 0 out of 10. Like, God.
I think that shows that both Claire and Leon kind of have that side to them in their personalities, though. Like, I'm the furthest thing from a Cleon shipper. I do not like that ship at all. I really love Claire and Leon's friendship. Like, I will get emotional thinking about their friendship sometimes and tear up. It's ridiculous. But Leon and Claire are both flirtatious just as a personality trait. So I didn't hate the scene. I do think it was a little awkward, but I kind of thought it was cute, personality wise, to see that from the two of them, especially since I think I'm just repeating myself now, but we know that both of them are flirtatious characters. They flirt with other people in the series too. It's not
Right, absolutely. I mean, Leon starts doing it almost immediately later that night, let's face it. So for me, this is the thing. So Remake 2, I think I've said this before. The thing that I dislike the most about it is that it just doesn't have the same level of depth for me in many different aspects. And I think and I'm not saying I think the character of Claire was written well. I just think the script could have had a little bit more time spent on it. I think that is maybe why it doesn't feel quite the same to me. And someone said this, and I hate that I don't remember who pointed this out, and I apologize I'm sure it's one of the other podcasters as a thing. So if you're out there listening, I apologize. But the thing about Remake 2 is you look at the main cast and you can see Leon, Sherry, and Ada becoming the Remake 2 characters, becoming the characters that they do in later games. I feel less that way about Claire. I agree with that sentiment. It doesn't necessarily feel like this Claire is the same, she becomes Code Veronica Claire and so on and so forth. And that's sort of where a little bit of juxtaposition is for me. But in terms of her performance and in terms of her personality, for the most part, I was fairly happy with how they got that right. Steve, what did you think of Remake 2 Claire overall?
It was all right. No, honestly, I've got... While Alison Court is going to have she's got the nostalgia argument for me. So I'm grew up with that one. That's the one I'm most attached to. I think Stephanie did a fantastic job. As a reimagining of the character, although I would argue Claire in this is a little bit less unique. She feels a little bit more like they've took the actiony parts of Sarah Connor, the actiony parts of Ripley, and blended them with the original Claire Redfield in the way she behaves and portrays.
Right.
But the general notes, the notes and the motifs are there, and I can't complain with that. I actually like this vibrant, sassy Claire who don't take no crap from no one, especially when she delivers the best F-bomb in a video game to date. That scene with the gate man, I'll get you. I was feeling it. I love that bit.
Yeah, gets me every time.
And when she's I would say Claire's a lot more argumentative time around. But I want to say a little bit more hostile, especially with whenever Annette is on her, I've got to stop William crusade when Sherry is in danger. Claire ain't having none of that.
Yeah, she calls her out.
I loved that so much. Her and I shared the same dialogue in that moment. What she said came out of my mouth, and then she said it right after me. And it was probably one of the most exciting moments in my life that she followed up my sentence with the exact same sentence. But Claire was kind of very argumentative like that in Code Veronica, too.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on this, actually, because I know we all know the likelihood of a Code Veronica remake is low. At least it feels low.
No,
all right. No, I don't mean that in a bad way, Hope. I hope I am wrong, because I want to see Stephanie Panicello do another take, as I want to see what her Code Veronica Claire is like. Because, like I said, the chances of them matching up with the original Code Veronica Claire are low, and I want to see what they do with it because I want to see a shall we say a more feisty Claire versus Steve Burnside.
Yeah,
but
that's right. Actually, that's a very good point. I'd love to see her interact with the characters of Code
the
Veronica.
character chemistry has to be different.
Well, the way she meets him in the original is still pretty feisty. Like she shoves a gun in his face. He tries to like smack it out of his face, and she just puts it right back in his face and tells him to shut up. Like,
yeah. So just basically, if it's Stephanie Panisello, turn it up.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'd say there's probably one scene that's a little bit in RE290 in 2019 that's maybe a little bit cheesy. I love it, but it is cheesy. It's where she's like, I've got this, and squares off against Birkenform. Yeah, Birkenform 3. It's like, it's so cheesy. It's so like 80s action movie. It hurts.
Well, Resident Evil, it's part of its charm is to be a little bit cheesy.
Yeah, and that's why it's like it's a juxtaposition, but I love it all the same.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it gives me chills, but every time Claire's on the screen, I pretty much get chills.
Oh,
excellent.
And then she has it's the same kind of thing on the train, isn't it? When just before they leave, we're like, I've got this. Don't worry, you're going to be safe. Stay in the train. And then obviously Birkin shows up again. Moment of apprehension. Then we whip out the minigun or the grenades, and he's done. It's while I would. Nostalgia argument is going to make 98 Claire probably the Claire for me. If I had to have a second place, it's Remake 2 Claire.
Nice. Fair enough.
As in, not in terms of vocal performances. Voice actresses, I'm trying to say. Because I still don't know which Alison caught Claire. I'm still thinking on that one.
Yeah. Okay, there's different rankings here.
There is, yeah. There's separate rankings. There's the Alison Court Claires, and then there's Steph. And that's not discounted Steph at all. Okay, she did a fantastic job for me. I would be happy to have her signed on as Claire Redfield.
For another round.
The foreseeable. Yeah, at least give her another shot. I see. I'm rambling now. You've all infected me with the rambles.
No. It's my brain went to a weird place, and is there a way to? If they don't remake Code Veronica, I know. Sorry.
No, you know what? If they don't remake Code Veronica, that is a damn shame because that is like, while it's not my personal favorite, all right, but it's a favorite of a lot of people in the franchise. Like it's a lot of people's favorite Resi game, right?
And a lot of people are over here like bitching that they want to see Wesker again. Like that would be a really easy way to do it. Remake Code
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
People want to see
so right.
younger Chris, like remake Code Veronica. People want to see
right.
Claire's story conclude. Remake Code Veronica. Like, what are you doing? Like, if they don't make bank off Resident Evil 4 remake and then put that money into a Code Veronica remake, I don't know what I'm going to do besides scream and cry a lot. I'm already going to wear my Code Veronica cosplay when I go pick up my Resident Evil 4 remake pre-order that I know I'm going to pre-order like an idiot, even though I'm just crying the entire time because this should be Code Veronica and I'm getting not Resident Evil 4. Like,
Oh,
anyway,
amazing.
sorry.
Should we talk about another game? Should we talk about Code Veronica by any chance? Okay, a little bit of in between. Again, shout out to Batman and the Resident Evil podcast boys. Immediately following the incident, Claire said her goodbyes and left Leon and Sherry behind. She had to find her brother and did not want to be delayed by the authorities. Both Leon and Sherry needed immediate medical attention and they waited behind and were taken into the custody of the US government. Meanwhile, Claire's ongoing search for her brother led her to Umbrella's Paris lab facility. After infiltrating the building on the evening of December 17th, she was captured and taken to Rockfort Island, a prison facility somewhere south of the equator and home of the legendary Ashford family, co-founders of Umbrella, which takes us to the once Dreamcast exclusive Code Veronica, which then would later release on PlayStation 2 as Code Veronica X with extra scenes and all that stuff. The return of Claire Redfield, and also the return of Chris Redfield. In many ways, for me, and I have said this in the past, this is the third game in the series. Resident Evil 3, obviously everyone knows the story. It was a side game given the Resident Evil 3 name. But for me, Code Veronica feels like the wrapping up of the Redfield story to a certain extent. Alison Court obviously returned as Claire, as we previously said. And unlike Resident Evil 2, Claire is the sort of lead protagonist, at least for the first bunch of hours, and then suddenly the bait and switch where you get to play as Chris as well. So Claire gets to fully lead this game. Steve, do you remember what your first reactions were to Code Veronica? You know, or how you felt about Claire Redfield coming back as the quote-unquote solo protagonist?
Well, as the first returning protagonist, that's after Jill.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, she beat Leon to the punch, and we didn't know Chris was coming back, so yeah.
Yeah. No, honestly, I was hype.
Yeah.
I was one of those people who didn't get Code Veronica on Dreamcast. I got CVX. I got the PS2 version, which is apparently very blue, foggy, and a little bit Devil May Cry demo abuse may or may not have happened. But no, Code Veronica was okay. You have to understand, Hope. I have grown leaps and bounds, because if this was several years ago, this would be a very different discussion about Code Veronica, about why
This is true.
Yeah, the deep lore for Steve is Steve used to have an irrational, stupid hate for this game, and he has grown. He has grown to find and appreciate many things about it.
Oh my god! I'm glad you have me on now with this person who can appreciate it as opposed to before.
Oh no! I don't hate that. I don't hate the game now. I my heart has grown 3 times since then. But no, as a whole, it's an interesting journey.
Phenomenal.
It's definitely the weirdest and wackiest, and I mean that in
Part
praise.
of why I love it so much.
Hope when you turn.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to win back points. You know, before Hope beats me to death. The soundtrack is obviously one of the strongest as well, and Claire, I would argue, this is the weird point now, because we still have Degeneration to go. I'm torn. Which is favorite Alison Court portrayal here? And no, we don't count Operation Raccoon City. Because she's very.
Dark Chronicle?
Yeah, no, actually, yeah.
Yeah, it's solid.
No, we'll go back to Code Veronica though. No, Claire in this is cool. Like, she's one of the few characters I think I like the most out of this. I know a lot of people like Code Veronica Chris, but I like Code Veronica Claire more than her brother in this one. Mm-hmm. She's with it. She knows what's going on. Even when she's caught off guard, like by a maniac with a sniper rifle, don't mean nothing. Still an assassin. Still going to completely call him a backwater hillbilly of an officer while he's in full regalia. You know, so ain't no problem. Plus, you know, she does action set pieces that the live action films rip off badly.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I don't find them a bit dumb, because I do, but that's just, you know, in the context of this game, and that everything is a little bit extra and a little bit wackier, it's fine. As for like generally what happens to her, I kind of feel bad that after her main game portrayal, she gets like maybe 10 minutes into, say, quote unquote, the Chris campaign, and that's it.
Yeah.
And in that, and the worst part is, a lot happens in those 10 minutes, including one of the meanest puzzles in the entire franchise.
Yeah, they want to get crushed. Yeah, no, that it's true. I always did feel it's like kind of a shame that Claire didn't get more at the end there, considering I always felt like this was her game.
Yeah.
And I love Chris in this, absolutely. But he does sort of waltzes in and steals that spotlight for a little bit too long.
Yeah, she's on the box art. She's in the.
No.
I get the feeling I should step back and let Hope talk now before I say my piece, or you're going to explode, right?
Oh no, you can talk. I feel like as soon as it gets to me, I'm going to have so much to say that my mind just goes like blank again, trying to think like what's coming out of your mouth first. Like,
all right, let's see what happens. So we were talking before about classic Resident Evil 2. Claire gets a fair bit of sort of the action-packed moments. This game, obviously, Steve, you mentioned it. The opening cutscene is ridiculous. It's the first big jump into absolute insane action set pieces. Which is so funny that Claire gets to be the one to do it. So there you go. I guess we were right what we were talking about before. And yeah, so there's a few of those sequences. There's obviously the bit where she runs out of the military camp with the explosions and stuff and the shutters coming down. She gets a few action pieces, but again, it doesn't turn her into generic action hero. She's got emotional depth in this game again with all the characters that she gets to interact with. Obviously, we
Yep.
get to see her with Chris finally, which is a great moment. She has such a emotional story with Steve as well. You know, the difference between getting to see them two on screen so much more compared to her and Leon is you get these great scenes between them where, again, she has to be there for him. She continues to be the grounding of Resident Evil. Like, Code Veronica is bat-poo weird. It's so weird. I love it. It's absolute lunacy, you know. And Alfred, Alexia, even Steve, obviously, he's a bit over the top dramatic.
Just on the podcast.
Right, yeah, exactly. Mr. Burnside, there we go. But Claire is the anchor to all of that insanity. It's the possibly the strangest game in the franchise, and yet she remains this realistic, grounded character. Which makes me wonder now, am I going to have to take back what I said about RE2 Claire? It's really tough, isn't it? I think
you chipped in too soon, Si. You don't know, do you?
Oh no, what have I done? I don't know. It's tough. It really is tough. She's got some great lines in this as well. Like when Steve suggests that she sends the coordinates of the island to an ally of her, and she goes, "Thanks, I'll do that." And he's like, "Oh." She gets the sassy stuff against Alfred all the time. You know, you can't be that important if you're in charge of a backwater base. Just, oh no, why did I choose that? Maybe it's Code Veronica. I do love this game. I really do, and I think, yeah, Claire is a big part of that, especially. Right, okay, let's unleash it. Hope, start away. How do you feel about Code Veronica?
Well, I agree with everything you say. Like, I love her so much in this game. Like, if you're gonna force me to pick a favorite, it might end up being Code Veronica.
Mm-hmm.
Claire might be a little biased because I literally love everything about this game. I love how see, I can't speak. Over the top with action it is. But it's also still like really scary and has that eeriness and that classic like survival horror atmosphere. So I don't really think it leans too far one way or the other. I'm supposed to just be talking about Claire here, but I can't. Like, I love Code Veronica so much and all the characters so much. Claire's like really great in this game. I think she shows the most emotional diversity in Code Veronica.
Yeah.
She's got that level-headed coolness, but she's still, even after the event she went through in Resident Evil 2, experiences fear over and over and over again. We see her show her fear and how scared she is. But she snaps out of that. She's brave. She's very determined and snarky, sassy, sarcastic. Like, everything that makes her her is here. I love how sassy she is in Code Veronica. Like, it's just done so well. I love her banter with Steve. I love when she gives him the machine guns in exchange for the Lugers, and she doesn't give him any ammo, and she starts laughing at him. Like, that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole game. Their dynamic between the two of them, I just really, really like. I love Claire and Steve together. That's my OTP. Like, I really love their chemistry, and you can see her more, like most people see it from him, where he develops the feelings for her, but you can see her developing feelings for him over the course of the game. A lot of people just like close their eyes to it because they don't like Steve and they don't want to admit that the feelings were mutual there. There are interviews that say that Claire had feelings for him. I'm just throwing that out there for the haters. Like, it was mutual. Sorry to say to the people that don't want to accept it. It was mutual. And it's just really sad. Like, it's so sad to see like the relationship between the two of them build up just for things to end in the way that they did. Like, literally rips your heart out and takes a piss on it. It's just so sad. I'm having like so many emotions. Like, my heart's really like tight right now. I'm like clutching my, you can't see me, and I'm like trying to think of like how I want to work everything. This is why I wrote stuff down, but I wrote so much I can't find what I want to say. I'm coming to this prepared because I know I'm a freaking frazzled mess. It didn't matter. It didn't matter.
Set your notes. I want to just sort of talk about that relationship a bit while you look through your notes. what
I think-
I like is everyone, so many people in the Resident Evil community are mean to Steve Burnside. Claire isn't really mean to Steve at all.
She's not like she sasses him in the beginning.
Right,
Right,
it's very
so.
it's playful and stuff like that to me, because what I like about it is that, and I hope you'll probably know this, I don't remember how old Steve is meant to be, but it's nice to see her interacting with someone closer to her age,
Right.
in this way, because obviously she spent a lot of screen time with Sherry, but they still get to have that dynamic where she's more of a dominant personality, and she pities him. That sounds really patronizing, but not in that kind of way. Just in the way that
She feels sympathy for
right,
him.
exactly.
That would be a better way to.
Yes, she's sympathetic to him, and it's nice because not every male character, and maybe we're getting into a whole like a different thing here. Steve is not a macho character at all, and it's nice to see that and see that relationship and that dynamic. And maybe that's why some people are a little bit like, sort of, oh, this is weird and different. I don't know. But for me, I really like that. It's a completely different spin on it.
Right.
I just want to chime in, and I want to
it.
say this because for all the shippers of Steve and Claire, I totally get you. And I think the only reason people maybe, shall we say, turned off again is because they haven't seen like the Dark Side Chronicles version. Because I would argue a lot of people against it, maybe just due to Steve's Code Veronica vocal performance. It wasn't the strongest.
It seems like a lot of people specifically hate on him.
Yeah.
His voice acting, which I didn't even hate. Like, there are moments in the original where the voice acting definitely could have been better. But then there's other times where it's like kind of cute. Like, I don't really mind it. It's just on the occasion, the actor, it's like, what were you doing in that moment? Why would you bring that portrayal with you? But
that's what I mean. You see,
even
if it's debatable in Code Veronica, it isn't in Dark Side Chronicles because there's like a lot more vocal chemistry there, which is clearly the developer's intent to reinforce it. At least that's the way I would see it.
I think it was funny, like where Sai said how Claire's got a more dominant personality still. In Dark Side Chronicles, Steve even makes a comment like, "Oh, great! Now I have to deal with this girl's power trip." Like really. Their banter with each other is so cute, and like I really liked the Dark Side Chronicles interpretation of it because it's just constant back and forth between them, and I love that. I love that they didn't split up, so they just constantly were having dialogue with each other. But like their dynamic pairs really well together. Like Steve's a pretty unique character, and like how you say he's not really macho, he's still like tries to get this tough guy attitude.
Yes.
But you get to see where it's, he's trying to keep that persona up. In the Dark Side Chronicles, he, is a little more fearful and not so much like in your face cocky, which I like both ways. I love when Steve gets cocky. I think that meshes with Claire's personality really well, like with her sass and stuff. But, Steve still has a lot of really badass moments, too. He saves Claire's life a handful of times in Code Veronica, which doesn't really make her a damsel at all. It just shows that she can be vulnerable, because we've seen Claire save herself and save other people so many times. Like, so it's nice to see that even somebody as capable and badass as Claire still needs saving sometimes. Like, she's not invincible. And I feel like a lot of people just dislike Steve so much. They don't think about how he literally saved her life more than once. They don't think about all the badass stunts he does. Like, he really can bust a freaking move. Like, I don't understand where all this Steve hate comes from. Like, just get over the voice acting. Like, it bothers me so much because he's my second favorite character. Like, out of the whole franchise, obviously Claire's my first. This is supposed to be about Claire, and I'm going off about Steve, so I'm going to try to not keep going off about Steve, but it's just as a big Steve fan, it's very frustrating because, like, he is, like, maybe just as emotionally diverse as she is. Like, we see him cry, we see him go through all these different emotions. Like, he's hot-headed, he's also compassionate, just not to her degree. It's just, I don't know. They go really well together. I think they're character traits complement each other very well. I love seeing them interact. Love their chemistry. That was probably my favorite thing about Code Veronica was Claire and Steve and their partnership. But overall, like, Claire's great in Code Veronica, but I think she's great in everything she's in. So that's not saying too much coming from me.
That's why you're on the podcast, Hope, because we need a Claire superfan.
Thank you.
Steve, any final thoughts on Code Veronica before we move on?
I want to just talk outside the lens of Steve Burnside, because there's one other character Claire interacts with, which is kind of touching, I think. It's despite the fact that he's the entire reason she's in this mess.
Right.
Is Rodrigo. You know, literally the second she's out of that cell and she can see he's hurt, okay, what are you going to do? And to which he says, like, I'm going to just probably stay here a while and bleed. And you can optionally go and get him hemostatic medicine, and they have a nice little bonding, touching moment there, which just shows that even though this guy really has messed things up for Claire in the past, like, you know, shall we say, couple of days. I think that this is over the course of Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah,
or October?
It's
like
yes. I think it's October.
Yeah, well, it's she's ruined a couple of days for Claire at the very least.
You about to say he's ruined their Christmas?
I was going to say ruined a Christmas, but then you realise, no, it's not over Christmas, Steve. But the point is, like, she still helps him and still has a very touching moment with him, even when he's pretty much saying, "I'm going to stay here and die." She's like, "Are you sure?" You know, she's a very empathetic and cool character in CB.
Yeah.
Plus, she sasses the bad guys, and we all know that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I wouldn't have brought that up, but yeah, good point about Rodrigo. I think it's what's really cool. We talked a lot about Alison Court, obviously. We've got one more Alison Court appearance to go, but I think it says a lot that she got called back to be a starring role like this. Almost as well, the fact that this is a Resident Evil on a brand new console, sort of testing out some new waters and stuff. It speaks of the strength of Claire's character and of her performance as Claire's character. Because obviously, yes, Jill came back previously, again, intended as a side game, and also for obvious reasons, but with a new voice actress. Whereas Alison is the voice actor who got called back, the first voice actor from the series to get called back, as far as I can think of. So that's pretty cool.
December 27th, 1998. The horrific events that occurred in Raccoon City were just the beginning of the nightmare. The rabbit hole went much deeper than I ever imagined with the Umbrella Corporation's sick and twisted ways. The vast amount of information I came into contact with at an Umbrella facility hidden from the public eye was simply staggering. As much as I feared for my life when facing off against the T-virus-infected monsters and G-virus-infused abominations, dealing with regular gun-carrying security officers was in a way much worse. A thought I never imagined I'd consider based on the god-awful things I had witnessed firsthand that night in September. But as vicious as all of those creatures were in Raccoon City, they couldn't hold assault rifles or call for backup to take me down. Although the Umbrella Europe facility I'd broken into wasn't the first time I was dealing with the company, as Raccoon City had surely introduced me to them in ways I'll never forget. This was the first time seeing how they ran their business from a cold corporate side. The dark offices lit by bright computer screens were well guarded, instead of being overrun with the undead. The information I was able to come by was enough to make my mind spin. There was too much to process in one sitting. Every digital folder opened up another set of digital folders, each containing various documents and photographs from various experiments conducted from all over the world. My body shuddered at the other unfathomable amount of corporate secrets that resided at the other branches hidden across the globe, along with the sheer agony of those they captured to test their latest viruses on as well. The pictures alone were enough to make my stomach turn. There was this one file I was able to access, one that definitely struck a nerve inside me, so deep the blood in my body felt like it went from ice cold to burning hot in a matter of seconds. The folder was labeled Project Nemesis, and detailed what looked to be some kind of prototype bioweapon developed by Umbrella's French division. A hideous abomination of flesh and tubing, with medical staples and surgical tape, all wrapped up like a holiday present from hell. It wasn't just the record of such a monster being built by their hands that sent shivers down my spine, as I had a feeling that I'd surely uncover more horrible things that Umbrella was hard at work on, for unknown purposes and parties of interest. It was the date when the creature was supposedly set to be released for field testing. According to the file's documentation, it was deployed during roughly the same time Leon and I were caught up in the Raccoon City outbreak. The thought that this thing was out roaming the streets that night was almost too much to comprehend. The only other piece of information I came across in my search, in this case, leaving me more puzzled than terrified, was another folder I discovered, seemingly hidden away elsewhere on the desktop. A mysteriously labeled directory for something called the Progenitor, but it was locked with much heavier encryption. I don't think I'll ever know what was in that folder, but whatever it was, it didn't sound good to me at all. I thought that everything was in the clear with my escape from the facility, since I either knocked out or got past most of the guards that came my way, but everything changed when the alarm went off. There must have been some kind of hidden trigger system somewhere in a room I didn't see, which ultimately placed the whole facility on high alert and put me in a meeting with the entire security force. Although I did my best to take them out, I was unfortunately knocked out and taken to an unknown location in Europe. I heard the guards mutter something about Rockford Island and a set of numbers pertaining to me, which makes sense now, as I sit alone in a dark and damp prison cell. I think it's safe to say that this is Rockford Island, and those numbers are my prisoner numbers for this place. I've become a criminal in the eyes of Umbrella. How ironic. They should be the ones behind bars, not me. But mark my words, their day of reckoning will come. The only light I have to write this in your journal is coming from a small lighter resting on an old desk a few feet away from my cell. I haven't seen anyone in what seems like hours upon my incarceration here at Rockford Island, but I'm starting to hear what sounds like gunfire and explosions from above, and every now and then, small bits of dust rain down on me from the ceiling. Someone else is here on the island. Who they are and what they're doing, I have no idea. But hopefully I can find a way out of here soon. I'm writing this all down for you, Chris. Maybe you're somewhere here on this island too. I know it's a shot in the dark, but it's one I'm willing to take because you're all I have to hope for on this godforsaken island now.
Alright, so let's jump ahead a little bit. A little bit more information in between these two. Upon her return to America, Claire joined the NGO TerraSave, a group that aided victims of bioterrorism and campaigned against inhumane medical experimentation. Soon she travelled regularly around the world helping people and raising awareness of the glowing plight of bioterrorism. It was a role she enjoyed, and she revelled being in the position of rescuer rather than fighter, as chosen by people such as Leon and Chris. She also often visited Sherry, who is now in full-time custody of the US government. In 2004, when the BSAA was formed, Chris invited his former STARS teammate Barry Burton to join as a consultant, and this was how Claire came to know him and his daughter, Moira. Although Barry and Moira had their differences, Claire became close to all of them, with Barry acting as a mentor/father figure to both Redfield siblings. In return, Claire viewed both Moira and Polly as her younger sisters. In 2005, well, we'll get to that. In 2005, however, Claire was thrown right back into the nightmare after being caught up in the T-virus attack on Harderville Airport. So this is the events of Resident Evil Degeneration, the first in the trilogy of CGI movies. They're all Leon-centric-ish, but this one has a fair decent amount of Claire in it. She's on the box art. She's a major character. There's no getting around that. Claire has plenty to do in this film. So, this one's a bit of a weird one because it was nice to see them paired up, but it's kind of a shame that they have to split off again. They get their own sort of subplots to follow. With Claire sort of working more behind the scenes, perhaps. She winds up getting injured as well, so she doesn't get to do quite as much action-packed stuff as, say, Code Veronica. But straight off the bat, it's worth mentioning, she gets to slap a senator in the face, so that's pretty cool.
I love it!
So, Hope, let's start with you. What did you think of Claire's portrayal in Resident Evil Degeneration?
I thought she was handled so well in Degeneration, but I mean, again, I love all Claire's, but I've recently watched Degeneration again, not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my first time watching it, I was absolutely in love with Claire, but I was so bitter about how they kind of sidelined her from most of the action. And I felt like they gave more screen time to Leon and Angela, which greatly annoyed me. But my second time watching, well, not my second time, that's a lie, but because I watched it when I first got it, the one day I got it, I like watched it over again just that whole day. So I did mean to say second time. When I rewatched it recently, I kind of appreciated what they did a little bit more because Claire did get a lot of screen time. I feel like it just didn't seem that way to me because I was so bitter that they sidelined her from a lot of the action. Well, one, she gets like the best action scene in the entire oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The entire film. Where she saves Ronnie and Leon throws her the gun and she kicks a zombie in the head and like spins around shooting him. It's so great. That scene's amazing. It almost makes up for the fact that she's not in a lot of the rest of the action. But it's kind of interesting to see her in a, I don't know what word I'm looking for here. Just outside of all of that, I guess. Like, because in Resident Evil 2, she got a lot of action, obviously. And then Code Veronica, they really stepped it up a notch. And she got a lot of, like, over-the-top action scene. So even though she has her one main, pretty badass action sequence in Degeneration, it is kind of interesting to see her in more of a casual, maybe that's a better word, a casual setting. I think they did her personality perfectly. I think Allison did such a great job portraying it. I really, really loved Leon and Claire's friendship in this. This is where I'll think about it and I'll get like stupidly emotional because I just get stupidly emotional over these characters. But this scene where she's beating herself up because she blames TerraSave for, them not getting the vaccination and blah, blah, blah because of the Will Pharma stuff. And Leon goes to comfort her. It's just it's so nice. Like, I don't want the shippers to be hating me. Like, I'm friends with Cleon shippers. I don't want them to call me. I'm sorry. I don't see it. Like, I feel like that whole movie just has such strong vibes for their friendship. Like, I don't get any romantic undertones in that scene where he is comforting her. Like, that seems like genuine, pure-hearted friendship. I love it. And then at the end of the film, where she is like teasing him about going diving with Angela, like that just comes off to me like friends teasing friends that have a crush on somebody, or wanting information about how your date went or something. Like, people act like she's jealous in that scene. I'm like, I don't get any kind of indication that it's jealousy at all whatsoever. It comes off very playful, like you're poking fun at your friend, you're curious, you want to know more. Like, I love how their friendship was portrayed in that movie. I wish they had more scenes together, but they did have some really great scenes together where you can see like the compassion that they have for each other. But it just, there's no romantic undertones. There's just none. And like, I like that though, because a lot of times people like act like a guy and a girl can't just be friends. And even though Claire and Leon are both very flirtatious characters, I think especially in Degeneration, their friendship is just portrayed so well. And that's probably my favorite thing about the film, besides just Claire overall.
Yeah.
And
they have that scene right at the end of the film. Sorry, they had the final conversation between Claire and Leon, where they very much talk about sort of the divide that I mentioned there, where, fighter and protector, and they all go their separate ways. And that actually kind of pervades through the film as well. In fact, sort of, it's almost why they are separated to begin with, and go and do their own sort of things towards the same goal. So I guess that's sort of where they were leaning into that, and then it comes back together at the end. And they have that conversation.
Yeah.
Two friends that are fighting for the same goal in totally different ways, which also, funnily enough, brings me to my favourite line of the film. Just another great example of them hitting all of Claire's strong personality traits. It might be cheap that they throw in a child at the beginning for her to be protective of, but they did that. And but more than anything, stuff like her morality. She says to Angela about her brother Curtis that his actions may have been bad, but we're all fighting for a brighter future, which is just the most Claire Redfield thing to say.
Yeah.
Steve, how did you feel about Claire Redfield in Degeneration?
Best outfit.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I like it. But no, as a whole, I actually think she's gone from being the big sister to the cool auntie. And that sounds weird, right? As a metaphor, but I think you understand what I mean. Because obviously, as you said, protector. She's the one who gathers everyone around and gets the survivors to safety before Leon comes in and shoots things up. Even then, still manages to hold her own by being thrown a handgun at the best moment. It does a callback to Code Veronica almost with over-the-top action twirls and stuff.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the film.
Yeah.
And then there's like all the conversations she has, like with Discount Wesker, Frederick Downing. Yeah, and like
no,
drinks tea.
He has a name. It's Albert Wesker.
But I love it because she has such a energy to her, and not to be harsh on Degeneration, but even though I love Paul Mercier as Leon, I would say a lot of the vocal performances in this are a little flat, but not for Claire and Allison. I would this is why I wanted to wait until we got here, because I actually kind of feel controversial to take it may or may not be. I think this is my favorite time she's voiced the character.
Wow.
Like the actual energy.
Really good in Degeneration.
Yeah, the energy, the all the little cute little winks and stuff, and then she's like the sarcasm that bleeds through when she's handed a literal umbrella logo umbrella to defend herself against zombies. And then you've got obviously the protector side. She's trying to look after Rani. Like the entire reason she's there, I think, is just to take her to her mum, isn't it, or something like that?
Yeah.
Her aunt.
Her aunt. Sorry. And yet again, I think we're probably going to touch on this a little bit, but Claire is the one survivor out of all of the pivotal four that never opts to go into these situations. They happen around her, and she bosses it. Like she goes to Raccoon City. There's an apocalypse happening. Oh dear! She gets kidnapped by Umbrella. Albert Wesker attacks. She's in an airport, just taking a child to their caregiver, and there's a terrorist attack. And when we get to Revelations 2, great, she gets kidnapped. She never like signs up for this. She doesn't go to Spain to find the president's daughter. She doesn't go to Africa. She doesn't go on a boat in the middle of nowhere. She survives these things as she gets thrown at them. She doesn't volunteer, but she still steps up. And
that's part of what makes her so great.
Yeah, and in this film, I think she excels, despite the fact she's not really the combat specialist of the film. She does she takes for example, she takes Downing to task. She even has like that really strangely calmly unnerving scene when they're in the lab and she's just drinking tea, which is also one of the best gifs you'll ever see on the internet, along with that one wink, the elevator. It's weird. Even though I've just watched the film again, I'm still picturing the gifs everyone shares of this one film more than I am the film itself. But no, the Claire in this, she's cool. Like, I feel like I'm just treading over what everyone else has already said, but yeah, she doesn't do much. She just protects the group, but it's just so well done.
Yeah,
which is in comparison to some really big name voice actors not doing their best, which is probably another talk from the time about Degeneration in itself.
Right, we'll get there one day. Yeah, but no, I think you actually hit some fine points. Definitely, yeah, she's got the most energy. She really shines in this, and the Downing bit that you mentioned with the tea, and he gets that suspicious phone call, and immediately she's straight in there, cuts right to the chase. Like, what was that about? That seemed weird. What's going on? She's been through this before, so she got the question.
Was he low key flirting with her and trying to just get in her good books or something?
I don't know.
Trying to be the friendly English guy, when it turns out he's the evil English guy.
Which is, I mean, if you're in a film and you've got an English accent, big surprise, you're the bad guy. So
also,
I love when he spills the beans to her, quote unquote, and she immediately is like, "I gotta go tell Leon," and he's like, "Well, what's gonna happen to me?" And she's like, "You didn't really seem to worry about that a second ago," and just continues to call Leon. I just love it. And then, like you mentioned about Rodrigo and Code Veronica, captured her pal, and she still goes and gets some hemostat medicine and takes it to him and is concerned. The senator is a piece of shit this entire film, and Claire goes back to help him twice. That at least coming to the top of my head twice, even though we know he's a scumbag. So she's just so awesome. I just love her. It's in her nature to care for people and to protect people, and it's just so great. And they do a good job showing that in this.
Cool. Steve, any final thoughts?
Honestly, Generation in itself is a weird creature, but Claire is the strongest, despite not being quote unquote the protagonist. She's like what's the term they use when they're not the lead but like important? Deuteragonist, or however you pronounce it. They are the strongest character in the film. Even though I watched the film yesterday and I can't remember Leon's sidekicks, Angela Miller.
Angela.
Yes.
Yeah, even though she's like meant to be the second character of the film, Claire naturally steals the show every scene she's in, which is appropriate.
That takes no effort for Claire to do.
Not really. Yeah, you're right. It's
okay.
Weird.
So let's tie this up. So that is the last Alyson Court appearance, in terms of the ones we're talking about. Following that, she would reprise the role a few more times for Dark Side Chronicles, Mercenaries 3D, and Operation Raccoon City, but this is the last time that she appeared in a major story or a non-retelling. And then we move on to the most recent canonical appearance of Claire. But before we get there, yeah, I know, right? Over the next few years, Claire still travelled the globe working with TerraSave, aiding the ever-increasing numbers of bioterrorism victims. TerraSave even hosted the BSAA Alpha team at their headquarters, and she became acquainted with Piers Nivens, who fished for old stories regarding her brother. From that point on, they kept in touch via email. In 2011, Moira Burton joins the organisation, and a party is held to welcome her and other new employees, but this gathering is raided by a team of mercenaries working for Alex Wesker, and several individuals, including Claire and Moira, are incapacitated and transported to an island in the Baltic Sea. This is the setting of Resident Evil Revelations 2. This is the first time that Alyson Court didn't play Claire. She's performed by an actress who, as far as I'm aware, still just goes under a pseudonym of James Baker. I don't think there's been a reveal. And,
there hasn't. I tried to figure it out.
And I think, funnily enough, how he kicked off the news and the way that Resident Evil fans can be, sadly, that might be for the best. This game was met with fan outcry in terms of Claire Redfield, with not having Alyson Court in that role. Capcom's defense was that Alyson Court sounds too young for the older and more mature Claire Redfield, and we didn't want to confuse gamers when hearing her voice alongside the young Moira Burton. Insert whatever your reaction is here.
What a strange thing to be praised for. You sound too young.
You sound too young to play this character now. I guess. I don't know. Claire is, in her 40s here, I think, maybe late 30s. I don't know. It's a weird situation.
32 in
Revelations. Okay. Wow. Okay, I was well off.
And she was 26 in Degeneration.
Nice. Here comes the trivia machine. So let's talk about the voice actress performance before we actually get into the character portrayal. I guess it's quite controversial. Steve, what did you think of Claire's performance, or the performance of Claire, I should say, by James Baker in Revelations 2?
Honestly, now the dust has settled. As a bronze medal, it's okay. Of the three voice actresses, bronze medal, obviously, unfortunately, it's adequate. I would say there are definitely good moments of emotional range, but overall, yeah, for me, the weakest. Not bad, and arguably stronger than some other vocal performances, especially when it comes to the Revelation side games. But still, the weakest Claire for me, personally.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I don't really have any qualms with it, but someone has to be third place, really. It didn't really faze me at the time. It doesn't really faze me now, but it's weird, isn't it? I think, and it's mostly just weird because Alyson played Claire for so long with no recast up until this point, whereas every other main character had been played by multiple people. So,
not to get into the argument and not to besmirch James Baker's name, right? But the argument that Alyson can't do an older Claire voice seems peculiar, because having seen how she talks on Twitter and converses with people and in video and things, she will be fine. At least, my totally biased opinion. So it's a shame she was recast, and for what they did and what they could do, James Baker doesn't deserve any flack. That's all Capcom for me.
Yeah.
But again, still bronze medal, and it's a shame, I suppose.
It's a weird one, right?
It's hard for her to compete with the other voices that we've had now at
Yes,
this point too.
exactly. Yeah.
Allison did such a good job, and then Stephanie did such a good job. So it's not that James Baker did a bad job. It's just when you compare her to the other voices, the bronze is what you get. But I mean, I still liked her too.
Yeah, to clarify, I don't hate their performance. I just I think it's unfortunate.
Like bronze is still better than not getting a medal at all.
Exactly.
This is true. This is certainly true.
It's not a medal made of tin.
I wonder, I guess they didn't approach Alison at all. Is that right? I don't know if that's the case, but I mean, she's an actor, so she could probably change her voice. Anyway, that's not the point. We got what we got. There isn't necessarily anything wrong with it. I agree with you guys. I find the situation very strange. Like you say, the excuse is very odd, but nonetheless, it is what it is. So this is Claire returning to the protagonist role for the first time in a video game since Code Veronica. Quite a lot of time passed. And it was a fan demand thing, or rather, the writer of the game brought her back because he was a fan of her, I should say. There was talk that she was going to be DLC at one point for Resident Evil 6, but that never actually panned out, so they decided to make her one of the leads in this game alongside Barry, that we've already talked about, obviously, so it's going to be fun to talk about the other side of the game. Right, so here's the thing. I played this game when it came out, and I didn't really touch it since, to be honest. I really like this game. I just hadn't gone back to it until the beginning of this year. So I played it for the first few months of the year, and in preparation for this podcast, which we're now recording in August for people listening from the future, I had to rewatch the cutscenes because it's not a character that stood out the most to me in this game. I have to say, I don't think they do too much with her. The focus is more on the other three of the four main characters, and I think that's okay. I'm okay with that. You know, you have to give other people their time to shine. In terms of the broad Resident Evil canon of characters, Barry's back in this game. You know, people wanted a playable Barry for a long time, so that's fine. And we've got...
Yeah, it definitely was more of a Burton game.
It is a Burton,
yes,
game. Exactly, yeah, it's a Burton game. And we get two new characters who... Hopefully we'll see them again, and hopefully they'll have some greater importance as well, but it's nice to let them shine. It's always nice when we got new characters coming in. Even as a massive Claire fan, I wasn't overly disappointed that she wasn't in the spotlight. That has to be said. Steve, did you feel the same way about this one?
Yeah, despite the fact that she has some actually really good moments. There's arguments about localization, I believe, with some of this, but
yes,
she has some really good moments in this. But like, despite being, shall we say, the most ancillary to the plot, she still does like have some really good moments. I would argue there's one scene that rubs me the wrong way, and this is probably the one time I'm going to complain about Claire Redfield in the scene. Right, when they first encounter Natalia, and properly, like when they actually talk to her, she's acting very not like Claire would do, in my opinion. Like Moira takes up what Claire would do. It's almost like in this one scene, Claire doesn't really seem to be focusing too much on the child's well-being, and instead Moira is channeling RE2 Claire and worrying about Natalia's well-being, to the point where Claire's almost aloof with it. That's the only real time I've got a complaint. Otherwise, she's fairly strong, and like the bits involving, I mean, Hope's probably going to be the one championing this bit the most, but the stuff like involving Neil, like, I felt for her. The vocal performance there was very strong. Like, localization or no.
That you said that. I'm so glad that you actually felt for her. Like,
yeah, like localization or no, she's that scene where she's crying and she's upset about how this person who she's clearly very attached to, whether is it like in the Japanese version they're just co-workers, and in the English localization that is implied a relationship. Either way, she's attached to them and is broken by the fact that he has betrayed her, and you can tell she's hurt by it. Obviously, she soldiers on after this and just wants to get the overseer in chapter 4, but until then, she's not in the best state, and it shows. And I kind of like that she's vulnerable. It's a side you don't see very often of Claire herself.
Yes, I agree with the points that you make about Natalia. Definitely, is a little bit odd, but again, it kind of allows Claire to do something different, play a different role. Moira demonstrates sort of more what Claire would traditionally do, so it allows Claire to focus on some other things, looking out for someone who isn't a child for once, which is nice.
Deposit something, and this is going to sound really weird.
Go for it.
I big Moira Burton fan. Burton fan. Kind of feel like she's almost proto remake to Claire in this, in a way. You know, she's sassy. You know, she's very sassy, very foul mouthed.
Yeah.
But also hates Barry Burton because she has to have a thing. So yeah,
that's a really good point. Huh.
It feels like RE2 Claire is here as well as Revelations 2 Claire, just with a different name. Not to besmirch Moira in herself, because through like the struggle and a few extra bits, she's definitely her own character as well. There's just definitely a lot of RE2 Claire in her DNA, so to speak, her design.
I think we're supposed to see how much of an influence Claire had on her since they were friends for so long too.
This is where it's established that she's known the Burton family, isn't it? Because until then, we didn't know that Claire even knew anyone outside of, we've never seen her on screen with Jill, for example.
Mm-hmm. We don't really have much insight into what TerraSave has been doing, so we don't know who they've been working with and who she would have met. So this is where a lot of that comes into this game.
Yeah.
So in terms of Neil, I would agree. I think that moment that they have later on makes complete sense to me. I'm going to piggyback off of stuff that Hope was tweeting the other week, actually. So when you actually put it into the context of everything, we haven't, like I just say, we don't know too much about what TerraSave's been doing. We've just been aware of them. And looking back on one reason why I gave all these sort of like paragraphs of information, at this point, Claire has been with the company for 13 years. We don't know how long Neil has been there or how long they've worked together, but you could assume it's anywhere up to 13 years.
It's about in between 7 or 8. I did the math, at least from us knowing when he was, I can't pronounce the city.
Terry.
Yes, thank you.
Right. So,
and
7 or 8 years.
In Degeneration in 2005. So it's been at least 7 or 8 years they've known each other.
That is a long time.
Yep.
So when someone does what Neil does and sells out the company for reasons that he's justified to himself, that's going to emotionally affect you. Claire has put a lot of stock into TerraSave over those years, and we were talking about in Degeneration, Fighter versus Protector. To me, TerraSave and what they do kind of represents all of Claire's hard work for peace against bioterrorism. So to have someone that she relies on within that company, someone that she's worked with all this time, it makes sense for her focus to be on that. To me, again, I feel like I parroted a bunch of Hope's opinions that she tweeted about the other week. I apologise, but
it's okay.
I completely agree. I know you've probably got plenty to say anyway.
I'm just trying to stay quiet so I don't too much because I've got a lot to say.
We'll let you off the leash in a minute.
Yay.
So before I do that, though, Steve, what do you think of this particular, perhaps controversial line, which isn't in the Japanese script, when Claire picks up a gun for the first time and she says, "It's more reliable than any person." It's a Code Veronica reference. It's neat. Do you think it represents her character?
See, this is the thing, isn't it? I feel like Claire's going through a lot of turmoil in this game. And me personally, I feel like the Claire from Code Veronica disagreed with that statement when Steve said it, which is why maybe I can see why some folks would be controversial with it. Like, because it sounds like Claire's obviously took she's now agreeing with Steve. I mean, she's clearly gone through some stuff. If she's come that far, that she now agrees with the concept. You know what I'm saying? It's a bit of it's a character reversal, but at the same token, I can understand why. If it had happened after, if this sequence had happened after Neil's betrayal, that I can see a lot more. It would resonate a bit more strongly, I think, for me.
I think it was supposed to be a little foreshadow.
Yeah, because it's Neil's gun, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, wait, no. It's the first gun, isn't it, where she says that?
Yeah, it's the first gun she picks up. But I think it is meant to be foreshadowing. And I agree. I think it's because she's seen some stuff. She's been, like, say, TerraSave all these years, been on the front lines of helping people who've been affected by this stuff. So she's been through the wars
Mm.
She does a lot of she's a bit more battle hardened in this game. She takes charge even over her, her superior officer Neil, who says yes at one point that they wait till dawn before they climb the overseer's tower. She goes, well, no, we're going to go right now just in case anything can happen. So
see, that feels like classic Claire to me. That kind of behavior there. That bit does.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like we're missing some pieces of the puzzle.
Yes. Yeah, there's some interquills here you could potentially have, right?
Yeah, I that's the thing. I haven't. Is it Heavenly Island? Is it set before or after this? I haven't actually read this yet.
After. I haven't read it yet either, but it's a couple years after.
Okay, so the Claire in that could be totally different again. Yeah. I would like to know what has changed in Claire's mindset. Obviously, the death of Steve has clearly affected her.
I was going to say, I think they wanted the player to know that Steve's still on her mind. Like, people might argue against that too, but...
I mean, I don't see no reason against it because, again, I'm not the biggest fan of Steve Burnside, but he's like there is a hanging loose thread. There is a hanging loose thread there regarding whether it's just his corpse or whatever, which I think we would like closure on at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Claire, if Claire is affected by it, she clearly seeks it as well.
Exactly. So here we go. The question that we've led up to this entire time. Hope, how do you feel about Revelations 2 and its portrayal of Claire?
Okay, so let me try to get my thoughts together. Let me think of where I want to start. Something people typically seem to complain about is how she doesn't show enough emotion in the game. And like people often say like, oh, it's supposed to be maturity, but I'm not buying into that. Like, I still expect more Claire. Well, they don't even think that like she's got to be suppressing a lot of her emotion in this game. One, because they're literally injected with a virus that responds to emotional turmoil, especially fear. So it could kill her if she got too emotional. And then two, I think it's a lot of her trying to stay strong for Moira because you got Moira freaking out. And like, if Claire was also giving in to any of her emotions on the surface, that's just going to stress Moira out even more. So I feel like she's suppressing stuff for a lot of reason there. And then there was also an interview before Revelations 2 came out where they were talking about how Claire is internalizing a lot of things and that a lot of stuff going on with her is underneath the surface. So I think that's something like a lot of players don't think too much about, but me being obsessed with Claire in the way that I am, I'm always trying to look at her like on a deeper level. I feel like a lot of her core personality traits, again, are still there. She's shown to be very protective, especially over Moira. She's shown to be determined. She's sassy in that game. She freaking sasses Alex every time she talks to them on the bracelet. She even makes some silly jokes, like we get the Claire sandwich line. Like, she's still her. Like, basically, like, I think, again, like you guys were talking about voice actor, like, I think it's a lot to do with the voice change. And to me, there were a lot of moments that I really liked with the new voice actress. I feel like she channels a lot of similar energy to how Allison portrayed Claire in the original Resident Evil 2, where she's got a lot of that dry sarcasm and stuff going on, a lot of that nonchalantness. I can see that in Revelations 2 Claire. And I like how Claire's ability to love is usually like a core part of her character strengths, but in Revelations 2, it's kind of depicted as a flaw. And I think that's really interesting, but a lot of people seem to just get angry about it instead of appreciating it. All well-rounded characters need flaws, and I think this was really fitting for Claire. It gave her more depth, and it was also kind of endearing. I think it was really obvious she was blinded by love in regards to Neil, and I thought that was so cute, thought it was so sad. It frustrates me so much that so many people get mad at her, just it pisses them off instead of them feeling any kind of anguish for her, understanding what she's going through it all. I feel like people can gripe about them adding more romantic undertones to her relationship with Neil in the English version, but that only added something to the story. It didn't really take anything away. It didn't really change much, because I think those romantic undertones were clearly displayed in the cutscenes between them.
Mhm.
And a lot of people choose to be ignorant of that. Like, some of the dialogue or voice acting that I really enjoy is when she's interacting with Neil in the opening sequence. That seems very flirtatious to me. I don't know how people don't see it that way, but I've watched it a million times. I've taken screenshots. Like, their specific mannerism. I think it comes off very flirtatious. If you don't want to see it as flirtatious, they're obviously very close to each other. I think it's incredibly annoying when people get mad at Claire for caring about Neil when they knew each other for so long prior to Revelations 2. Like, we just talked about it being around 7 to 8 years. I'm really bad at math. I think it was closer to 8. Want to go with 8. But it was a long time regardless. And I feel like a lot of people project their feelings onto Claire because they have current knowledge from playing the game that he's basically a villain. But
Right.
Claire and the rest of TerraSave loved and respected him for all these years, so he must have been a pretty cool character in their eyes. And a lot of us just didn't really get to experience that because the game didn't give us a lot of content with him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that makes her out of character at all. I think it's perfectly in character for her to act the way she did in regards to someone she knew for years and clearly had a lot of feelings for. Like, I kind of understand what they were going for, where Claire comes across as like she's not thinking that much about Natalia because she's worrying so much about Neil. I do wish they've had her vocalize a little bit more concern for Natalia, at least when Moira called her out on it.
Yeah.
But like, I can see and respect what they were trying to accomplish with this, because we've already seen how good Claire can be with children. So I think showing her unintentionally prioritizing Neil was supposed to make it blatantly obvious how important he was to her, whether or not you're playing the English version or not. Like, from my understanding, she still doesn't have much to say about Natalia in the original version either. And I think that's a lot of what's going on under her surface level, where maybe she doesn't vocalize it as much in the original, but those cutscenes are still there. So it's clear that she's still worrying about Neil. And I think the English version just made that more obvious for people so they would get it, but people still don't want to accept it for what it is. So I don't think that it was that she didn't care about Natalia. I think she was just impulsively worrying sick about somebody else that she was really close to. And I feel like the situation was probably also triggering the memories she had of not being able to get to Steve in time to save him.
Mm-hmm.
And then going back to the Claire and Natalia thing, people always talk about how great Claire is with kids because of her relationship with Sherry and then later Ronnie. But I don't think it's like as black and white as people make it out to be. Like, her compassion and her bravery is what makes her come that way. And of course, her nurturing side that she's shown to everybody that she's come in contact with, whether they're a good guy or a bad guy. She's always been shown as somebody who wants to help others. She's instinctively nurturing. She's very protective over the people she cares about, even strangers. But despite this, in the original Resident Evil 2, she's constantly losing track of Sherry, which is also reflected in Degeneration when she loses track of Ronnie in the very beginning when all the chaos is unfolding. And when she first meets Sherry, like, there's this tug of war scene between them where she's holding Sherry's arm and like practically pulling it out of its socket, trying to get her to stay. So like, while she's no doubt great with kids, there's also part of her that's sort of kind of bad with kids too. We can go back to that comment she makes in the remake of Resident Evil 2 that everybody's like, what is this dumb shit she's saying about comparing her dead parents to Sherry not having her parents around a lot? Nobody likes that comment. But in that moment, Claire is trying to relate to Sherry, and she's trying to make something bad seem good. It didn't come off very well, but that's kind of realistic. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like that's something that people do a lot. Like, they've got this idea in their head. They're like, that's going to sound, comes out, and it's like, that wasn't the way that it seemed in my head. So, like, it's kind of realistic, and it kind of just ties into that little bit of terribleness she has with handling kids. Like, I actually think it's kind of funny that she has these moments of being really terrible with it, because she's got this reputation for being awesome with it. And like, she's earned that reputation. It's like the pros outweigh the cons in that situation, but it's not as black and white. It's not like, oh, she's just strictly super good with children. Like she's got this quirk to her about it where like, she's not always that great. It's just like her greatness just outrides those moments where it's not, not so good. So like her meeting Natalia, I didn't really think it was that out of character because she's bombarding her with questions, but it is out of a place of being concerned. And then she's also got all this shit on her mind that she's like trying to keep under wraps. So it all comes like kind of bubbling out at once. Like she sees this little girl in danger. Like, I don't know. I just try to make sense of it the best way that I can because it's published, it's out there. This is this character now. So now you've got to like look at her in a new light and try to understand why she does the things she does. I don't know. I think I've covered everything. I'm not sure. I can go on and on and on about emotions too.
I think that was fantastic, personally. Yeah, hopefully, I understand a lot of where you're coming from. Definitely, especially with the kids stuff. Like, it's circumstance. She just happens to be dumped in these situations with, say, Sherry. She grew up an orphan, so it's very possible that she didn't have any experience with kids before she had to deal with the Sherry situation and so on and so forth. So you would probably be pretty rubbish with them. I didn't grow up around kids, so I'm absolutely awful with children, but so I can understand that. Hopefully this has been sort of like a soapbox for people to maybe hear your point of view on it, if nothing else. It'd be interesting to see what people say in terms of a reaction. I know it's a very like hot topic with loads of people with loads of different opinions. But that was amazing. That was like 10 minutes of straight. Okay, so.
And I still feel like I didn't say enough. I'm like, I know I missed. Well, I'm scrolling back through my 200 some counting.
And welcome to the world of podcasting, which unfortunately does have to come to an end at some point. So I'm going to lead us now to the big question. We talked about it early on. Got to get some answers in. Favorite Claire Redfield rendition, if you like, whatever which make your choice. It doesn't have to be written in stone, but after all this discussion, how does everybody feel on their favorite one? Steve, I'm going to throw it to you first.
See, now this is I've pretty much laid my cards on the table already, but despite the fact that she's not the lead, I really do like Alison Kaur as Claire in Degeneration a lot. Like she pretty much makes the film watchable for me. Yeah. So as much as I like RE2, like it's my favorite Resident Evil game, I have to give it. I have to give it where it's due, and then because obviously, if we're going to go, if we're going down this route, then it's RE2 Claire, then it's Code Veronica Claire, then it's Stephanie Panisello, and then it's James Baker. Not to knock James Baker, but and not to discount Steph because she's like I want to see Stephanie Panisello's Claire in a Code Veronica kind of encounter, or if not that, give us a new story. I don't mind. Yeah. I wanted Steph reprise the role at least a few more times.
I love the not obvious answer of Degeneration. That's great, and I completely understand.
It's purely from the fact that I watched it and I got like, you know what, she's really good in this.
You're totally right. Really that's the thing. I'm. Oh, here we go. So yeah, Resident Evil 2 is my favorite game. But after this conversation, I think my favourite Claire Redfield performance, at least right now, is Code Veronica. So I laid it all out at the beginning, and I've just flipped the table. I'm gonna go Code Veronica. I'm gonna go Code Veronica, which is great. It feels like this whole season of the podcast is leading up to something. Don't you think? The villains episode, the beginning of the season, Adam said he'd never finished it. And now we're having this Anyway, that's not the end of it. Anyway.
Oh, right. You're just musing there, sorry. Okay.
I wonder if we're going to talk about that at some point soon. And finally, Hope, what is your favourite? I'm going to gun to your head. You have to pick something now. What's it going to be?
Gun to my head. This is really, really hard. And I don't know if I mean this or not because I really love them all. It's hard. Like I'm trying to think that there's a gun to my head and I'm me a second, gunman. I need to. I'll give you an answer. Give me a minute. We didn't talk about it much, but like, I would maybe have to go with Dark Side Chronicles.
Wow.
Because
Nice.
I love, first of all, Code Veronica and Resident Evil 2 are like my favorite games. So I love that Dark Side Chronicles capped that. But there's so much dialogue in those games. I love that the characters are constantly going back and forth, so there's more to appreciate. So I think I would have to go with Dark Side Chronicles.
That's
Maybe,
a nice
I don't
sneaky
know.
answer. I like that.
It's hard. It's really hard to answer. If not, I would I would maybe see. Degeneration is really good, and I was thinking the same thing rewatching it recently. Like, she really steals the show and has so much charisma in that. But she's always got charisma, so like, I don't want to act like Degeneration's got it more. So it just was really well done. But I feel like Code Veronica would get the most emotional range still. So if it wasn't Dark Side, it would probably be Code Veronica. I don't know, because I love them all. Because there's like things I love best about each Claire.
It depends on what you're looking for, right?
Yeah, like personality-wise and aesthetic-wise, there's things I love about each Claire. And like her hair color in Revelation, so beautiful. Degeneration, it's so beautiful. She's got gorgeous eyes in Degeneration. I love her freckles that they give her, and I just like, I could go on and on. But if I have to pick an overall Claire, it would probably be Dark Side Chronicle.
There you go.
Oh, it's hard.
I made it happen. That's what matters.
I still am sitting here like, is that the truth?
Right.
It's really not the truth, because I like them all equally. It's hard. I've got a gun to my head. I have to say anything to survive.
Well, I'm gonna roll us to the end before you have to you make yourself change your own mind again. Nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors. If you'd like to be part of the show, then please look into auditioning for our file readings. One way to get in touch is to email us at faspraypod@gmail.com. But of course, the best course of action is to join our Discord server, where you can discuss Resident Evil with us and other fans and listen to the podcast live as it's being recorded. The link to the server is in the description of this podcast and also on our social media. The link to the server is in the description of this podcast and also on our social media profiles. You can follow us on Twitter at FASprayPod, on Instagram at FASprayPod, and on Facebook at facebook.com/FASprayPod. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, please do leave us an iTunes review if you can. It helps spread the word. And you can also support the show at patreon.com/FASprayPod for as little as $1 a month. Previously, we talked at length about Resident Evil's most recent first-person title, Resident Evil 7, but in our next episode, we go back to the first to discuss the franchise's original spin-off, Resident Evil Survivor. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of the Pueblo people individually. I'm at Siniac_123. Steve is at FB Steve Was Taken. And you can also follow Hope at HopeHavoc. Finally, thank you for listening, and have a good week. Yeah, we did it.
Did you have fun?
Yeah, I wish I was just, more articulate with what I'm trying to say. But I guess that's one thing I don't have in common with Claire, and it's different people.
Well, in my totally unbiased opinion, I think you did great.
Yes,
Thank you.
that was a good time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think people are going to really enjoy that.
Plus, Claire Redfield is always fun to talk about, right?
And I mean, like, if you guys ever do an episode on Burnside, I'm all here for it.
He needs a few more appearances. That's the thing. I'll just be talking about.
I mean, he's been in right. Let's
I
break this
can
down.
talk
There
for
we
2
go.
hours about him if you
He's been- if we're stretching it like as wide as we want to cast it, we've got
Right, go on.
CV, we've got CVX, we've got Dark Side
Dark Side Chronicles.
Yeah, we've got Dark
S.C.
Side
Perry's
Chronicles.
Code Veronica book.
Yeah.
Exactly.
you got
Yeah,
the book.
yeah.
We can do it, guys.
There's got to be a radio drama or something, right? They
We'll
always
make
do
one.
ones about the side characters.
We'll make one. It's fine.
Yeah, Resident
I
Evil: The
could talk
Beginning
2
too.
hours about Neil too. We had like 3 cutscenes with him.